The School District of New Berlin is hereby called to order. In recognition of the serious and important nature of our efforts here, we will join in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. For those who wish to prepare for the meeting, we will have a moment of silence. Prior to this meeting, notice was given to the public by posting the agenda at each district school, the district office, and the city library. The agenda was also posted on the district website. Additionally, as per state statute, notices were published in the Waukesha Freeman on September 4th and September 10th. Copies of the agenda were forwarded to the Waukesha Freeman, the Waukesha County Now, and the Journal Sentinel, all of which have filed requests for all public notices. We're going to start with some introductions. I'm Amy Crosby. I'm the president of the school board. We have Janet Schultz, our vice president, Jeffrey Kurth, our clerk, Mitch Helmer, our treasurer, Susan Manley, and Kate Unger. And Kristen is not able to join us, but she is watching via the video stream. Our legal counsel tonight is Andrew Phillips, Von Briesen and Roper. Our staff members in attendance, we have Superintendent Joe Garza, Chief Academic Officer Dr. Kelly Sanders, and CFO Officer Patrick Miller. One quick note of order on your meeting packet on page 1 is the rules of order. So on item 3, only district residents may make and second motions, speak and vote. The time limit for speakers is 3 minutes per person, and no speaker may speak again until all have spoken. And what we're going to do is on here there is the microphone with a blue line. Please stand at the blue line. Do not touch the microphone. The microphone will be able to pick up your voice. You can turn it up louder as needed. With that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Garza.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Garza. I'm proud to serve as the superintendent of the school district of New Berlin. I'm proud to say that I'm entering my 14th year in representing the school district and extremely proud of that notion. I'm also a proud parent of 2 students that attended Elmwood Elementary and are now at New Berlin Eisenhower. The one thing that I can share with you about the school district of New Berlin is that we continue to be successful despite challenges. And it couldn't be any more true than this particular year as we finished last school year with COVID-19. And again, we've had challenges in the past, whether they were financial, surprised with new standards, costs that incurred that were unexpected, things like Act 10 legislation, which allowed us to have lots of flexibility that we've never imagined prior to, and so on. But these are just some of the many highlights that we continue to experience. And the point being is that our elementary schools are the foundation to what happens throughout middle school and high school and eventually graduation. We are just one of about 40 districts, so about 10% of districts were identified to significantly exceed expectations on the Department of Public Instruction Accountability Report Card. Ike and West are 2 of the top high schools in Wisconsin and within the top 5.5% across the United States. We opened our new first Fab Lab last year here at New Berlin West. And many of our students and teachers continue to receive significant awards and accolades. We also are extremely creative in our efforts. So again, when we see a challenge, we try and seek collaborative efforts with partners. Last year, one of those unique partnerships was with We Energies as part of the Solar Now pilot project, where we are now receiving approximately $100,000 in additional revenue because of the solar panels that we've installed at 3 of our facilities. And again, I certainly could go on, and what I would like to do is I would like to point you to the annual report that was recently released. You should be able to get a copy as you leave. But in that report, it gives a nice summary of all of the accolades and highlights that we experienced throughout the school year last year. The budget hearing will consist of several different topics. One of them is essentially the pandemic budgetary impact, the 2021 annual budget, the projected financial future, and then certainly public comment. As far as our pandemic impact, as many of you know, in March of 2020, we transitioned from in-person education to what we consider emergency virtual education. And essentially what that did is we experienced significant budgetary expense savings, but then we also did lose some revenue. These are the areas that we lost revenue. In an almost $70 million budget, every dollar sure helps, but $115,000 is not substantial. On the other hand, these are the savings we experienced, which in our opinion were substantial. I would like to point out that while we did experience staff layoffs, they were few and far between. We were able to keep most of our employees in-house working and being able to receive a paycheck. The only areas of staffing that were impacted were less than a handful of shuttle drivers that we have hired in the school district, as well as food service workers. But with budget surplus plans, we certainly looked to take some of those dollars and we have to reinvest them back in response to the pandemic. We had to purchase additional personal protective equipment. The board has approved additional staffing to meet the needs of our students, increased costs for cleaning, disinfecting, and then technology to support both in-person and virtual learning. Certainly the school board's support has been incredible throughout this situation, and we'll continue to work with them and other partners to ensure that all of our students are being successful in meeting their educational needs. Further, one of the things that we had a question about previously that is becoming much more clear now is whether or not this pandemic might impact the state level budget with some sort of budget repair bill. As of today, I'm glad to be able to say that we don't believe that's likely going to happen, although it is still possible. And again, we continue to plan for the future. The dollars will be placed in the fund balance so that we can respond accordingly. We may be able to use the surplus like we did last year to fund unanticipated capital projects or projects for the long-range facility or equipment plans. Notably, we were able to do some repairs over at Orchard Lane's rear parking lot, some grates at the Elmwood entrances, and some battery backups here at Berlin West, among others. And fortunately, our technology infrastructure has allowed us to be set up for virtual learning to the degree that we've been able to do thus far. We also continue to make adjustments as needed. And these are just some of the adjustments that we made that were approved by the school board to allow us to continue to balance our budgets and minimizing the impact to the classroom. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to our CFO, COO, Patrick Miller, for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Joe. So essentially what I'm going to go through for you this evening is to talk about some of the budget assumptions that went into the planning of the fiscal 2021 budget. You see on this slide some of the assumptions that we use. These assumptions are based, the first, the 179 per pupil increased revenue limit, part of the state budget. We have had several years in a row of increased enrollment, which is allowing our 3-year rolling average to increase. We had significant increases in our summer school offerings thanks to the Department of Public Instruction opening summer school for virtual learning. And we also have some increases in open enrollment as of today. What you see in the budget that's included in your packet, the sources that from which we receive our funding, you'll notice the two largest, property taxes and state revenues. Other local sources would be things like gates and other smaller revenues that we receive locally, fees, things like that. All of the other sources are 1% or less than 1%. Assumptions that we built into the budget for expenditures, the board did include in this budget an additional $250,000 to fund long-term or long-range facility improvements. We continued with our plan to increase 1-to-1 in kindergarten through second grade. This was again something planned by the district. We were happy to have the funding to be able to do that. We did give raises to our certified teaching staff of 1.67%, plus some market adjustments. We did budget for salary increases across the board, but right now we've held off on administrative and classified staff until we're a little more confident about the status of a potential budget repair bill. This slide shows a breakdown of where our dollars are spent. You can see that over half of our expenditures are related to instruction and instructional support. I also want you to understand that some of the expenses in support services actually could be instruction and instructional support as well. Things like some of the technology expenses that are directly related to delivering education to students. While it falls under support services, it is definitely supporting instruction and instructional practices. In this particular presentation, probably the one item that most people are interested in is what's going to happen with our tax levy. The property tax levy that's adjusted for the current state budget is anticipated to go down from $49 million to $47 million, a $1.3 million levy change. That's a reduction of over 2.5%. What the public needs to understand, we are actually benefiting from what I would call a perfect storm of increase in enrollment, a decrease in spending due to COVID-19 reductions, and an increase in property tax or property values. With those three things all happening at the same time, the district is experiencing a significant increase in state aid, which is a good thing. But I'm essentially setting the stage right now that that's also something that is self-correcting. So next year when our expenses return to normal, we're most likely going to start to see decreases in state aid, which the district has been used to as a property-rich district it's very common in the state of Wisconsin. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm happy to have an increase in state aid this year. I'm also not going to be surprised, and what I'm going to be modeling in the future is that the state aid is going to reduce as we return to normal spending. The property tax rates that we are projecting this year are anticipated to drop from $9.36 per thousand of equalized value to $8.84. This is assuming a 3% growth in property value, which I did confirm with the city is a legitimate estimate for this year. We've estimated a 3% property growth the last 2 years, and each year we have exceeded it. This slide, I think there are a lot of school districts across the state of Wisconsin that would like to see this slide. What we are showing is since the 15-16 school year, we have had a reduction in the property tax rate in the school district of New Berlin. This year with the 3% change, an estimated 3% change in property equalized value, we're looking at a 5.5% reduction in the tax rate. For the future, things that are always going to be in our mind as we do our budget assumptions for the future, debt within the operating budget is still going to continue to be the number one factor for past and projected future structural deficits. We are proposing a balanced budget, and I'm confident that we will be able to deliver a balanced budget. But what needs to be understood is that there are significant long-term or long-range capital projects that are not included in our annual budgets that are helping us balance those budgets. I'm very happy that the board authorized an additional $250,000 this next year, and I'm hoping that through sound financial planning throughout the year, they will be able to do that again. But it is something that we do have to understand. Other financial hurdles, again, I just talked about deferred maintenance projects, technology infrastructure, something that we're going to constantly have to be improving, school safety. Joe talked a little bit about some of the extra projects that were completed this last year. And looking ahead, what we are anticipating for this next year is that we are going to finish the year with about a $1.25 million surplus. But in fiscal 2022, we're anticipating that surplus is going to get, we're going to have to use that surplus to support a reduction in funds. Joe talked about the potential for a budget repair bill, and that budget repair bill potential seems to be waning at this point in time, but in the 21-22 school year, we will have another biennial budget from the state. And right now, it's every indication that we have is that school districts need to be prepared to have some budget reductions that are going to be associated with that next biennial budget. I am very proud to tell you that through the work of the board and the work of the administrative team and the other directors, we have been able to spend our dollars wisely, setting ourselves up to be able to handle this should it come in the future. This is another slide that I'm very proud to present to you. No longer under consideration by the board, school consolidation and an operational referendum. Right now, the board and the administration continues to look at short-term adjustments, budget reduction strategies in order to help us go further with the budget dollars that we are being given from year to year. That's my presentation at this point in time. Mr. Garza, if you come back up, and if we have any public comments or questions, I'd be happy to entertain them at this time.
And think once again, I think just in summary, we certainly have lots to be proud of in the school district. You know, we've got great staff members, you know, our teachers are doing an incredible job, you know, with the circumstances that we've been dealt with the pandemic, support of the school board administration, certain, you know, classified staff, great students, supportive families, and that certainly makes all the difference. What I can say is, not only are we delivering excellence, we're delivering it in a great value to our taxpayers. So we're certainly very proud of that. If there are no questions, I guess we'd like to move into the next portion of the agenda, which is that of our basically annual meeting.
I do have two questions, if it's possible.
Yep.
One, I always ask this question every year, so I'm going to ask it again. Is the levy that's being proposed the maximum possible?
Yes.
Okay. Second question is, you mentioned the fact that we're having reduced expenses as a result of COVID-19 and things like that, so it's creating this perfect storm. What if anything is there an expense that doesn't show up on the balance sheet as a result of what we're doing here? Or is there something that can be, I don't know how to put it. Is there something that's being shortchanged in the normal operations of the district because of the current situation? Or, I guess, is there something that you've been able to do now that can be carried into future years after all this craziness is gone?
Right, so just like via the microphone answer your first question, Mr. Yench. This slide does show the levy amount that we are allowed by law to levy for. And while it is a decrease in taxes and a decrease in levy, it is the maximum amount allowable by the state. Again, in years past, given the circumstances, the board did not always levy to the maximum, but in this particular year that we're talking about, the board will be. As far as your second question, there are still a lot of unknowns, to be quite honest with you. We don't know exactly how this year is going to shape out. Whether it's going to be, again, will we experience some of the virtual learning environments fully because either the pandemic is directing us to do so, or there's labor shortages because kids are from neighboring districts, their parents are having to work from home, and so, you know, maybe we have some staffing issues and so on. That is why we're being quite reserved about kind of calling our shots with what we need to do. So, for example, we budgeted the extra $250,000 for long-range facilities plan. And again, based on some of the efforts that the board made last year, we are now able to do that. But we're not spending those dollars until we know exactly what's going to happen as a result of COVID. Same thing with the administrator and classified staff raises. While we allocated those in the budget, it equates to about $160,000. It is in the budget, but we're not moving forward with those raises until we know for sure where we're going and where we're headed with regard to this pandemic. Further, right now I don't think we're necessarily shorting anything. In fact, I think we've gone the opposite direction. We are now funding things that we haven't been able to fund in the past. We've also expanded opportunities for our kids with the digital learning devices in grades K through 2, which hadn't happened previously. So now all of our students, K-12, have a device at their disposal, which again we did not have last year. We are not seeking additional reductions in staff other than central office, and mainly out of Patrick's department. And again, a lot of that is because of the moves that the board made by adjusting some of the technology and software. So we were able to find efficiencies there. So again, we're proud to be able to say that there have not been any significant needs that are reductions as a result of this budget. And in fact, we're moving, I believe, in the opposite direction at this time. All right, thank you very much.
The annual meeting of the School District of New Berlin is hereby called to order. All district residents wishing to vote during tonight's meeting must have registered in the lobby and received a voting card, along with the annual meeting packet. Suggested nominations are included in the packet. When making a nomination or a motion, please state your name and address. When voting, please raise your voting card high and keep it raised until the vote has been determined. The first item on the agenda is the election of a chairperson. I will now accept nominations for a chairperson to conduct this annual meeting of the electors of the School District of New Berlin. Do I have a nomination?
Good evening. I, Susan Manley of 14785 West Wilbur Drive, move to nominate Amy Crosby to serve as chairperson.
Second.
Thank you.
Do I have any other nominations for chairperson? Okay. Do I have any other nominations for chairperson? Do I have any other nominations for chairperson? With there being no other nominations from the floor, I, Amy Crosby, is elected permanent chairperson. The next item on the agenda is approval of the rules of order and agenda. The printed agenda is recommended by the New Berlin School Board and complies with the duties and responsibilities of the annual meeting for which action is deemed necessary. Do I have a motion?
I, Janet Scholes of 16020 West St. Francis Drive, move to approve the rules of order and agenda as printed.
A motion by Ms. Schultz, a second by Mr. Kurth to approve the rules of order and agenda as printed. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. All opposed, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. By show of hands, the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of the parliamentarian by chairperson. I appoint Andrew Phillips, the district legal counsel, as parliamentarian. The next item on the agenda is the treasurer's report. Since the electors have a printed copy of this report, do I have a motion to dispense with the reading of the treasurer's report?
I, Mitch Helmer of 6229 South Thompson Hollow Court, move to dispense with the reading of the treasurer's report.
A motion by Mr. Helmer, a second by Mr. Kurth to dispense with the reading of the treasurer's report. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. All opposed to the motion, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. By a show of hand, the motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
I, Mitch Helmer of 6229 South Thompson Hollow Court, move to approve the treasurer's report as presented.
A motion by Mr. Helmer, a second by Mr. Kurth to approve the treasurer's report as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. leave it raised. By show of hand, the motion carries. The next item is a resolution to adopt the tax levy for the 2020-2021 school year. Do I have a motion?
I, Kate Unger, of 4214 South Rigo Manor Court, move to levy a tax in the amount of $47,789,864 on all property, real and personal, within the bounds of the School District of New Berlin, City of New Berlin, Wisconsin, for the purpose of operating the public schools, including the maintenance of buildings and sites and discharge of debt.
I have a motion by Ms. Unger, a second by Mr. Kurth. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. All opposed, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. By a show of hand, the motion carries. The next item is setting a date for the 2021 annual meeting. Do I have a motion?
Jeffrey Kurth of 4085 South Adele Avenue, move to authorize the school board of the School District of New Berlin to establish a date for the 2021 annual meeting between the dates of May 15th and October 31st, 2021.
I have a motion by Mr. Kurth, a second by Mr. Garza. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. All opposed to the motion, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. By a show of hand, the motion carries. The next item is setting the school board members' annual salaries.
I, Susan Manley of 14785 West Wilbur Drive, move to set the annual salaries of school board members as 3,500 school board members, school board president as $5,000, and school board vice president as $4,500.
I have a motion by Ms. Manley, a second by Mr. Kurth. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. All opposed to the motion, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. By show of hand, the motion carries. The next item is adjournment. Do I have a motion?
I, Janet Schultz of 16020 West St. Francis Drive, move to adjourn.
A motion by Ms. Schultz, a second by Mr. Kurth to adjourn. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. All opposed, please raise your voting card and leave it raised. By a show of hand, the motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.